Well, I think that we had a very rich collection of presentations here. So I'm glad now that we can have a discussion also with the panelists. Let me introduce you the two panelists that we will join for the discussion now. Sujata Govada, founder and director at UDP International Hong Kong, and Stefan Krummeck, director of Farrells Hong Kong. So as I said, I think we had a very rich overview of different approaches and methodologies from top-down planning activities to observation, everyday urbanism, public engagement, spontaneous interventions, sensitive approaches, dealing with, sense of place, identity, belonging. So it was really, really interesting to actually navigate all these different projects, programs, and developments. I would like to ask to the two panelists if you would like to make some comments, general comments regarding this presentation, and then invite you to maybe ask some questions to the speakers so that we can start this dialogue. Sujata, would you like to start?
Okay, thank you, Luisa. I think very interesting session with a lot of diverse presentations, and I enjoyed all of them. I think just to give a brief, key takeaways, I guess, from Kate's presentation on productive precincts and powerful places. I think one thing that she said remained with me, which is top down with love. I haven't seen top down and love going together, and then curated from ground up. So these are really key to to create successful precincts. And very good examples of King's Cross rail yards, as well as the Port Sonora. I haven't visited these places, but I would like to visit them. I think later in a question session, maybe to ask you, when do these things fail? When do precincts fail to be successful? I think maybe it's good to get those pointers from you. Peter, I know we are in the same university, but this is the first time I'm seeing your work. Very fascinating. I love the idea of the bamboo, the book tree that led to the book house. And even though they are in contrasting situations, there is a link there. And and also how small I think what you demonstrated was that with a lot of dedication and effort, you can actually make installations which, can create a lot of difference in the lives of the people in the community in both cases. And I think maybe the question might be, what are some of the challenges that you had facing these, doing these projects? And I wondered whether the students also participated in the book house, or was it more just the local people there? Because I didn't see too many students in that project. I think coming to Gyani, the everyday urbanism, I thought you were completely thorough in your presentation, going with all the examples of I love the e-bike very much, how it's improvised. And I think this happens, like you can see it in Philippines, in India, and a lot of other places where people do this, and how they provide the they provide the last mile connectivity through this, which is, I would call it more like paratransit, but I think these are important. But also your examples in Hong Kong with the how the the domestic helpers use. I think they use the Hong Kong streets the best on Sundays, and you demonstrated through your streets in Chater Road as well as the Mongkok footbridges. I wondered whether you had any thoughts of how this can actually become like a more formal, I shouldn't say formal, actually, a more regularly occurring. I know it occurs on Sundays by domestic helpers, but how will it can be transformed for everybody in Hong Kong, not just the domestic helpers, so that everybody in Hong Kong can actually enjoy as well. Then going into Nuno, I think yours was a fascinating presentation, Nuno. I didn't realize when you started where you were going to end. And this is the first time I saw it also. I've been to Macau, I've been to your rooftop and your center, but I think the way you kind of showed the process of where you started and where you ended, you are really showing the huge possibilities that can happen. And these, I think, need to happen in all the cities in GBA to make a difference, really. I think these kind of projects will actually help. And the fact that the city is coming to you to use the rooftop tells that actually they recognize this is actually working. It's successful, and it's, I wondered whether, maybe a question for you is, did you think about developing like an inner harbor partnership or something, which can then take it forward even further? Like, like the South Bank partnership. So something to think about. So with that, I think I will, stop here and let the other panelists take over. Thank you.
Thank you, Sujata, for your comments. Stefan, would you like to make some comments?
Yeah, and first of all, thank you very much for the very exciting talks. And each one of them kind of appealed to me in a particular fashion. They obviously all evolved around creating public spaces, creating new neighborhoods, creating or maybe reusing certain aspects of the city. And we've actually been involved in revamping the Hong Kong urban design guidelines. And I think all these aspects which were touched on by the various speakers are very relevant to that exercise we've been undertaking over the last few months. I think it was very encouraging that when Kate spoke about these new districts, that she was about density and about how public space inserted into density can become a very valid approach to urban design. I think that's relevant for Hong Kong, because Hong Kong has this phenomenal urban density, but yet it's offset with this amazing landscape. Even when talked about COVID, I was interested to see where that discussion, where she would take that discussion. Maybe we could engage with that a little bit more, because I think that there's a perception that densities are a threat to, and Hong Kong has weathered the COVID quite well, and I think it's because of its urban fabric, because it has all these kind of breakout spaces and mountains offset against the urbanity and predominantly along the coastlines. I was also extremely fascinated by Peter's talk. Again, I also had not been aware or seen that work. What I think is fascinating about his work is that there are small sort of urban insertions almost of spaces which maybe would be considered residual or purely pragmatic, like Earth, and how an urban insertion can transform that space, make it a public. I think that is fascinating, and I think something to learn about that. It's not only big moves which form our public realm, but also these small interventions. I mean, obviously the treehouse also amazingly checked, amazing that it can even be achieved. So congratulations to that. Doing very analytical work, I thought. And what I felt was particularly interesting about that was that it was kind of the people, the residents or the people who are in the city kind of transforming an urban space which has already been formed. And interesting also what projects were selected and where this greater density of activities and happens. I think it would be quite interesting to understand the relationship between the public realm and where that, in Hong Kong's example, for example, where migrant workers are feeling that engagement, so that they actually want to go there. I think that's also quite a very interesting aspect. And no, again, similar to Sujata, I think it's fascinating project. And it results in conceived. In Hong Kong's case, I guess, always temporary because of the occurring reclamation, never finishing, never really getting the final state. Maybe now in the last 10%. So it seems like a sort of a bit of a similar approach, that there was a demand or a growth which occurred the reclaimed land along the inner harbor, and that was kind of also not planned. It was incidental in a way, and all the kind of passages and walkways were just residual spaces. Between all is a fascinating, in that project. So I think every touches on these different scale interventions, really. And I think that's fascinating. And maybe we can lead into a bit more of a on various aspects.
Thank you, Stefan. I experienced some problems. I don't know if your internet connection is stable enough. I hope you were all able to follow comments by Stefan. Yes, if you could please check your connection. Yes,
yeah,
that we are sure that you are fully stable. I also have a question from the audience, from Hendrik Tieden to Nuno. He's asking, while congratulating for the youth program you developed, he's saying restrictions to travel seem to have boosted even more local activities in your neighborhood. Is this correct to say? This might be similar to other places where people became more engaged with their direct surrounding. So I would like now to give the floor to the speakers again. If you want to respond to panelists' comment, or if you would like to add some additional reflections. Maybe we start from the beginning. Yes, Kate.
Great. I just thought I'd respond to the comment around when do precincts fail. And I think there's 3 or 4 things that can easily be summarized. So precincts fail when they don't realize they're precincts. So the power of what they can achieve becomes dissipated. So I think from the strategic perspective, understanding when you have a precinct, the extra responsibility that comes.
Maybe it would make it a bit better.
And then I think the second thing that's really important is when a precinct is not curated or designed or thought through from the ground up, when it's not led by a place experience, it will fail because it doesn't create the value that it intrinsically is able to. And then I think the third way in which a precinct fails is actually, and to use the word twice in the same presentation really, is when it's not loved, when nobody loves it, when no one takes a leadership position at any part of its life. You know, it's a bit like a child. You have 30 seconds of pleasure and then you look after it for the rest of your life. But the rest of your life is not at the age of 18, it's forever. So precincts thrive when they are loved, when they're actively managed, when people recognize that there's the opportunity for renewal and change. So for me, those would be the three reasons why precincts often don't succeed as well as they could. And I never give away the secrets of which precincts I think are a failure, because I probably never get to work with those clients ever again.
Thank you,
Thank
Kate.
you.
Peter?
I have more of a question, because it was very nice to listen to all the presentations, and it's really nice that we have a mix of academics and professionals. And I was just wanted to ask the table really this question about the role of education and in making places, because in all the presentations I saw is that the things that are in common, but yet every one of the projects that I saw was unique and very kind of had its own identity and its own character. And I find that one of the things that I try to teach my students is really the power of design, but not design only. There's a kind of assumption I find design is a kind of suited to certain areas. I feel that students come with a sort of preconception. And one of the things that I've learned in these presentations is that design has power on every level. And I'm just wondering the role that we have as educators to really teach this word, place making or making place. And I think it's not being spoken about enough. And it's a very important issue, because it's not teaching a discipline and it's not teaching people tasks or softwares. It's more a process of thinking about architecture. And making and thinking, I think, are very connected. So I just wonder what people think about this issue of education and making place.
I think it's also about empathy. So a lot of placemaking is about being able to be empathetic or to think about the end user when you may not totally be clear who the end user is, and the ability to actually project forward how success will feel. So the emotional sense of attachment, which is often uncomfortable to talk about, and it doesn't have the same kind of markers for success that make it easy to teach.
Peter, I think that this question, some of us are practitioners and some of us are also teachers. And I think that one of the things in terms of teaching, what is our role in terms of education, I think that it's a bit different in Macau or in Hong Kong compared to some other places like in Europe. So I think that what is happening in Macau is that these questions, if they are important, we need to basically make them explicit, because it's not students, they don't immediately understand this potential. So I think that we need to also teach for impact, in the sense that, so one of the criteria for that project is that will produce a positive impact on that scenario. For us, architects trained in a cultural context like Lisbon or like Italy, this is kind of intrinsical to the role of an architect. But in Asia is not exactly like that. So in my syllabus, I always need to explain that you are designing from the public perspective. Why? Because most of the times design is not from the public perspective, it's from the private perspective. So what I would say is that our role as educators, we need to really understand where we are. And I think that we need to basically design our syllabus, design our education methodologies to achieve the intended results that we have. So as Kate was saying, empathy is quite important, but some people, they don't come to school with that. So we need to nurture that. And I think that happens by making that a deliverable, making that explicit, that you need to create, that you need to design from a public perspective, that you need to create a positive impact, and that you need to prove your positive impact. So they don't do it because they want to do it. They don't do it because that's their genuine interest in the beginning. They do it because basically it's on the syllabus, they need to do it. But after going through that, they really enjoy it, they really like it, and they take it. So I think that in Macau and in Hong Kong, these are the places where I have more experience teaching. Also in other places in Asia, I think that this idea of public perspective, of public matters, it's really important. And if we don't clarify that, it's very difficult to achieve the result, because the mindset is on a private perspective mindset.
Yeah, also to answer to Peter's question, sometime I don't sleep at night thinking about my responsibility on teaching students about their responsibility. And because we are forming people that tomorrow they are going to be in the government to decide about urban design, about architecture. They're going to be in professional companies that are going to design and shape our built environment. So I think we have like a lot of responsibility about that. In fact, talking about myself, I spent most of my time with some of with my students. Some of them are here today to teach about their responsibility rather than because I believe that the technical instruments are always changing, very fast changing, particularly if we are talking about software, particularly if we are talking about even regulations. Sometimes we are seeing a lot of new technological advancement that impact on the way in which we design cities. We see also how pandemic is entering and changing, overhauling the overall system that we were used to. So we cannot predict all that, but we can empower students to have a critical stand over what they are doing and what are the consequences of what they are doing. And I agree with Nuno on the very different approach that you can find in the different cultural milieu. The European one and the Asian one that typically prepare students on a more professional, let's say, how to say, task-oriented preparation. So yeah, I feel that it's a very important question. Probably there is no answer for me, but we need to keep asking ourselves that question. So thank you for that, Peter.
And I can just add one last thing. I think curiosity is another thing that's really important. And you know, I have two kids who are at university. I sometimes think they go to university to get the piece of paper to start the rest of their life. But in the other extreme, for me as a practitioner, the idea that I can work in a country where I know nothing about the culture and nothing about the context is the most exciting thing, because it allows me to ask all the questions that in my own country I may not feel curious enough or that I ought to or need to ask. So that sense of curiosity is such an important companion to empathy.
Yeah, Louise, can I?
Yes, please.
Yeah,
it's open discussion.
Yeah, I'm in practice as well as in teaching. And I really believe that the whole emphasis, like, you know, of an urban design program, like, you know, where you talk about the people and the citizens are your clients. So you look at it from that perspective is very important. But I think to add to that is also, I think the point that Kate brings in is also the viability of, like, so it's a win-win situation for the community as well as the, you know, for the public and the private sector, everybody, then only things work. So if somehow at the teaching level, students, maybe a good way is to really look at a lot of these case studies and analyze them in more depth and detail, not just like a 1 week exercise or something. Then I think they maybe through that process they can learn more. And also I also strongly believe, because I have my own architecture background plus planning and urban design background and education, I believe that like even architecture students should be exposed to urban design education. I in fact think all professionals should have a little bit 101 urban design that needs to go. Just imagine if in our government sector, if in our public sector, right, you had instead of 1 urban designer or 10, if you had like 100, I don't think we'll be making so many bad mistakes in city level developments. So I think the education of improving and having a lot more urban design programs is very important, and also trying to teach at least fundamentals of urban design to all the other, programs are relevant or even not relevant, I think it was very important. And maybe even getting to the next level of middle management, education on this would become key in the future, because we'll be designing many cities, many interventions and everything, and I think it's important.
So Sujata,
yeah.
Just one point that I think is really, really important that you raise is that I think the way we teach architecture sometimes is just inherited, and we're not really thinking about the students, because all the projects that I do are led, built, and kind of with the passion of the students. And I'm just a facilitator to allow this to happen. And what I've discovered is that there's really, and I find it very much in Hong Kong, a lot in Asia, that students are interested in social projects. Students want to make change. Students want to build. They want to go away from the screen. They want to act with their hands. They want to make a difference. And I think the school, we're too archaic. We're very sort of pragmatic in terms of inheriting a course and not flexible enough to see how fast our students are reacting. And I think we've got to become more agile as an educator to incorporate and change.
More important, let's step down.
Yes, please.
Peter, I would like to ask you something, because we discussed in the morning session about the role of architects when it's approaching to community projects or implementing architecture in different contexts. And I think your work, I can see a difference, right? With the first one that you did in Hong Kong, I think there was not so much this design engagement. So let's say you work on it, maybe it was a creation with the students. Of course, you have this engagement to decide where to put the book tree and so on. But I think it was a product that was implemented like by site, right? Even not bottom up or top down, just was like an intervention there. But I think in the book house in the village, there was a slightly different. So you went there and you merge your knowledge with the knowledge of the village and you create this. But I think in both, I can see the leading of a professional, right? Even if you work with the community. So how this is working, right? I think we discussed today about these bottom-up interventions, which are led somehow by the community, and this, I don't know, say how to call them, a kind of way of maybe informed bottom-up intervention in a way that there's a professional, the capacity to analyze the urban context with a more professional ways, but then integrating this in knowledge by the community. But I think your project has two different levels. One, maybe less relevant with working with the community, and one very high. So you can elaborate a little bit more on this one.
Well, the thing is, my background is in practicing architect, and then I went to academia later on. So the way I teach is sort of practice-based. It's a praxis kind of formation. And what I realized is where I'm strongest is to set a vision, to set a question that leads to a vision. And what I try to do is, it was impossible for me to do these three things: practice, research, and teach. And then I said, well, if it's impossible, why aren't they the same thing? So in actual fact, they're all the same. So the way I teach, the way I practice, and the way I research is the same. So the buildings that you see are actually, government grants to do research projects about dying minority villages. And then what I do is then I try to sort of set a message to the students, and some react, some don't, but all, and they see it from different angles, but all are very interested to participate. And I think what I've understood is to offer the students the platform to participate, and then not be too concerned of whether if it goes left or right. You have to be confident that something positive will happen. And the book house took 3 years. It's not an easy project. I had to find the funding. The villagers, were really skeptical of the whole thing. over time, you build trust, especially because you're working as an institution. And I think in Hong Kong, there's a kind of a gap. There's practice, and there's very sort of strong practices and generally quite big. But I think there's an opportunity to have a sort of university type of architectural practice that can do work that other people can't do. And I think it's somehow used to be in the UK in the 1960s and 70s. And I think maybe we could return to that model, that actually university is also practice.
Well, yes, I think this is very relevant, Peter, because in my own experience as a professional, I've been into academia for more than 10 years, but working and researching on public space. But then at some point I realized that something was missing in my research activity, that I wanted to actually touch the ground and be more engaged also with places and bottom-up aspirations. And so that's why I founded City Space Architecture, and I'm now actually a civil society organization working on research, working with academic scholars, practitioners, but also activists, artists, and many other contributors that are part of the public space discourse. So in terms of, linking education to real projects on the ground, I think this is a key point, because I'm experiencing this while I'm developing my research. And also the Journal of Public Space is trying to create a framework where all these different components could come up together. Because public space, it's not just about research, but it's about, as we saw today, planning, observing, participating, and contributing. And you learn a lot by expanding your approach, not just from a research point of view, but also by, living, experiencing, sensing, as you were explaining with your project, and also posing, reflecting without even doing anything. You can learn a lot by just, take some time to elaborate. And so I think it is very important in terms of education. And I'm also reading comments here from some students that it is very important to teach how to establish that complex awareness on architecture and urban design, as Sujata was suggesting as well, because, and also Gianni was referring to responsibility that we have, because I'm also teaching at the university. And in fact, I was happy when the University of Florence asked me to teach urban design in a brand new master program, which is not related to architecture at all, because we have students coming from many different countries. They do not necessarily have a background in architecture. I have students from tourism, economic studies, political sciences, fashion, history. And so I'm supposed to give them basic information regarding what urban design is, because they are citizens living the public domain, and they can bring some key concepts related to urban design in their own professional activities, which is part of something completely different, but are somehow related in this public realm where we are all engaged somehow. So I'm glad that the discussion now is just moving to this direction. Probably, Gianni, you wanted to say something.
Well, yeah, many things. First of all, I would like to answer to Sujata's question of before. How can we translate this maybe into practice or into some sort of ideas that could be, that can become space one day in Hong Kong, particularly regarding everyday use of public space? I believe in a way that what we see both in Hong Kong and Shenzhen is part of the identity of this city, even if identity is a very slippery word and we know that it's always changing. But Hong Kong want to project this idea, very engineering idea of optimization, of efficiency, everywhere, in every inch of the space. Run, productivity. And yeah, so that's if you add space of stationary activity, if you add space for community engagement and different kind of activities that could happen there, then in a way you transform Hong Kong into a more normal city, which is no longer Hong Kong. And on the other hand, Shenzhen government want to project this magnificence and grandiosity with this mega plan and sign in a way of power of self-determinism, right? And even there, if the design would break down into different parts, make it more suitable for everyday use, then it would become much less impressive as a city in that sense, no? That wants to show off for certain kind of with certain kind of images. So I think that yeah, we are as like a battle, and everybody trying to take his own take the cake on his own side. And is the beauty of that is that we should be keep on doing this all the time. My student yesterday asked me, would you be in favor of bottom up or top down? And I answered them, it's yin and yang, right? So I think that it's a matter of creating a dialogue between these two parts. And going back to the students, I believe also that it's very important to empower them with knowledge, in the sense that letting them read, letting them experience. Now they cannot travel, unfortunately, much, but also inviting our colleague overseas. I've been learning a lot from overseas teachers as well, talking about one of my main goal, which is spatial justice. I have been learning a lot from Soja, by talking with him a lot, and in PhD sessions, and from Saskia Sassen directly. And when she was in Venice discussing about the idea of the city as an infrastructure, all this shaped my mind, shaped the idea that I will bring to students. And I think that we should do the same. We should empower them as much as we can. We cannot. It's like with architecture. We cannot determine the future use of a building, but we can build an infrastructure that can work with different function over a long period of time. That would be the most sustainable things to do.
I would like also to jump on this. I think that, Peter, what you're trying to say is, with your practice, you're being an agent for positive change. And I think that that part is one of the most interesting things for us as architects. So why are we doing this? It's because basically we want to be agents for positive change. And the idea of telling the students that they can do that by themselves with small initiatives. So some of the projects that you did are self-initiated. So are projects that no one asked you to do, but you're trying to be an agent for positive change on the community and also with your students. And because students go through that, maybe they are not used to that, but they go through that and they see the joy of just seeing someone smiling about your work, or thanking you for doing something, or just sitting in a place that you've designed. And then suddenly they are addicted to that. So I think that as educators, I think that one of the most important things is to be agent for, is to basically empower our students to be agents for positive change. And I've been doing that with also these projects that you're seeing. No one paid me to do the round table on the Inner Harbor. No one asked me, and no one paid me in the beginning to do any of this research, but it was initiated. I thought that it was really important. And by doing this, you create critical mass. And now with this, I will move to the question from Hendrik. Hendrik, so restrictions are boosting our local activities. Yes and no. So what was happening is the government, they couldn't use public space. And some people in the government, they came to our activities for many years. They came to do all these different workshops and sessions. So they started to get familiar with the space and to understand the potential of space. So when the public space was locked down, they looked for other potential spaces. So it happened something that is very strange, is that the private space became a space of freedom. Usually we think the other way around. We think that the public space is the space of freedom. But in this case, it's not. So in Macau, I tried to host an event that the art boards was planned for a public square, and they didn't allow us to do it on the public square. So we moved it to the rooftop. And it was a place of freedom. We had insurance, but we could do whatever there. So I think that what was very interesting is because of these restrictions, suddenly people looked into the available spaces and they started to consider other spaces that usually were not considered. And because we've been building that many activities during many years, suddenly this started to appear as a potential space. So I was very happy with this. And other thing is that this is really working as a public space. So we had our installation with the ladders, and suddenly a dance association saw it and they asked, can we use this for our dance performances? So suddenly we had people dancing on the rooftop during Saturdays and Sundays during one full month, and public that we've never imagined that would come started to come. And every day we have people going to the rooftop to take pictures and to do stuff and to study and to do to take pictures and to do lots of different events that usually take place on the public space. So I think that over time, this kind of opening up to the community is paying off in the sense that we are really expanding the possibilities, and it's quite interesting to be on this scenario now.
No, can I, there was one other question. For your biking, where you could take people biking around Macau, I can't imagine we can do that in Hong Kong. Did you have to, like, what kind of permissions you had to get to be able to do stuff like that?
Basically,
and how long it takes?
You just need to have courage. It's the essential. So I was riding a bicycle when I was living in Milan. I came to Macau and I understood that Macau was quite flat. So I had a car, I love cars. And during 3 months, I said, no, let's just use the bicycle. This was like 10 years ago. And I understood that it's possible. So it's not something that Macau is not prepared for that, but because traffic is slow, you can kind of ride a bicycle, but it's counterintuitive. So I'm riding in front, so people just follow me. And because of that, this is a supported event by the authorities. And so we have insurance, we have someone in front, someone in the back. The city is not prepared for that, but again, we are creating critical mass. We are building up these possibilities. And how are we doing this? Because we have 15 bikes in our place. So we don't rely on anyone. We can just do this on ourselves. So I think that sometimes it's also this thing is you don't need to ask so many permissions. So you need to have a bit of courage and a bit of interest. If it's boring, no one is doing it. But if it's kind of fun and if people understand that they are creating something together, it's becoming very, very, very easy to recruit. So we don't have any effort in bringing people into these trips. It's very simple.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, I like what you're saying, Nuno. You just start cycling and they are following you. That's a nice concept that we could apply also in many other activities and fields. I mean, you have the courage and, braveness, let's say, to start something which is different from, the standardized ways of understanding and doing, and so innovating somehow the actual perspective. And then since it is so attractive, then other people will easily follow. I like it.
Nuno, but they were chasing you or follow you? Nice.
Okay. All right. think we should.
Yes, so I think we have just a few minutes to close the session. So in case you would like to make some additional comments, Stefan, would you like to say something more to end this session? You are muted.
Yeah, I hope you can hear me a bit better now. I think
yes.
You know, we talked about students and how to engage them, and I think that all our cities and our districts and the neighborhoods have a very unique presence and demand kind of different responses and different ideas, and in order to make them successful, you really got to kind of understand them in their individuality, and to get students involved in this process. I think that we have to teach them a methodology and try to get them to understand, no matter what the background really, but what the components are of urban design and how it comes together and how we form the spaces and what the opportunities of the spaces are and what height means. And so there is a kind of a vocabulary, you know, the bigger ground of a development, the connectivities, the focal points, and I think that vocabulary, I think, is kind of the basic ingredient to urban design, which I think all the students must learn in order to really develop creative solutions. Most urban design tasks are extremely complex and involve a lot of different, not only stakeholders, but also different disciplines. I mean, architects, engineers, they all kind of contribute to these making districts and making neighborhoods. And I think that requires a very, very broad knowledge if you want to be successful. It requires a very broad knowledge, and so I think providing the students with the right framework. I also agree with obviously motivate them, then provide them the right seeds and provide them the right innovations. And I think that I think what Peter was saying, that he can be sort of the guy who can focus students to go in the right direction. I think that is obviously also a phenomenally important task. And I think you can see that in the projects. So I think that, but that framework, I think, is something which needs to be taught also with practice. But I think it forms a foundation to being able to deliver exciting urban design projects. So, and I think that's what universities can be a little bit free from the reality, right? So I think providing those seeds, that should really be the main focus of the education.
Thank you, Stefan. So I think we had a very rich discussion also. I would like to thank all the speakers and the panelists. Thank you, Francesco, for organizing this. And I'm glad this was recorded.
Yes.
So that we can, try to get some transcriptions from the presentations and discussions, and potentially also make this available later for watching.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Luisa, for your availability. First